Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. So, have you ever wondered what makes American stories and American entertainment unique? Have you ever wondered what makes American heroes unique? Well, that's what I'm going to go into today. And in order to do that, in order to explain that, I will be going deep into what American culture is. And I'm doing that now because we're in the middle of a cultural shift. And that larger cultural shift is already starting to impact independent entertainment creators. So it's coming from both sides, both from the top and from the bottom. But speaking of independent creators, I have two links in the description and the pinned comment for my 3 graphic novels. There are 2 superhero graphic novels and 1 return to form for low fantasy. They focus on the traditional idea of a virtuous hero. They are constructed according to a merit-based system, and I listen to my audience and provide them with entertainment, excitement, and fun. So if any of that looks or sounds appealing to you at all, click on one of those links in the description or the pinned comment and go on over and see if one of my graphic novels is for you. All right, so as I said, in order to get to the idea of what makes a American story and American entertainment, especially hero-based entertainment, unique, we must go into what the basis of the culture is, and that is being laid bare right now by the cultural upheaval that is in full swing. And quite honestly, nowhere do I see this more prevalently than the inauguration speech of Donald Trump for his second term. Because quite honestly, that was a masterful speech. Not because it was the most inspirational speech within American politics, but because I actually felt like he was speaking to me, or at the very least to my concerns. And that's what the country needs right now. Someone who the independent everyday man can feel like, hey, wait a minute, he's talking to my concerns, directly to my concerns. And those concerns are cultural. And quite honestly, as I listened to that speech, I was thinking of the video that I did last week. The video I did last week was talking about Razor Fist and Melanie Mack. They are on the independent side of this cultural shift, and they are in the middle of a, I don't know what you'd call it, discussion, furor, something, because I'm not really privy to what is going on, about the fact that people are calling them moral nags. They're saying, well, this kind of entertainment with its sexualization is okay, but that kind is not. And quite honestly, thank you very much to everyone who put comments in that last video, because in part, I was trying to understand what is going on there, because I don't follow either of those individuals, at the very least, very much. I listen to a couple of Razor Fist things every now and then, but listening to your reactions to my videos in the comments and the multiple different perspectives that each of you gave within the comments gave me a little bit of a more rounded understanding of what is going on. And that's actually where I want to start again today. Again, not that I know really anything about what is going on, just using this as an example. And quite honestly, most of what I'm going to say, I would take as being informative. Not as being opinion, but informative. And I was about to say, don't shoot the messenger, but no, go ahead, shoot the messenger. I don't care, that's me. Do whatever you want in the comments. So the basic furor, what Melanie Mack and Razor Fist are engaged in right now, is the fact that they play certain games, non-American games, and they say, well, there's sexualization in some of these games, and that's okay, but some other of these games, well, that's not okay. It's not decent. And quite honestly, most of the people in the comments, the majority of the similar comments were, it all comes down to the definition of pornography. Basically, Melanie Mack and Razor Fist are trying to be moral nags because they're trying to impose their own personal moral standard to define what pornography is, and that just makes them moral nags, which makes them equivalent of the quote-unquote progressive people on the other side. Now, there is a lining of truth to that entire thing, but I think most people in stating that are missing the point. And the point is very directly what these two individuals are and how they think. And quite honestly, they're Americans. You cannot separate that from what they're trying to say. And here's why. The thing is that it's not just about the definition of pornography, it's about how things are defined. Not just this one simple thing in this case. It's about definition, and quite specifically, moral definitions. That is correct. But the point is that they are using an American standard. As Americans, they're using an American standard to say, no, as Americans and as America or part of America, America gets to define where the line of morality is. Pure and simple. Now that's a bold claim. I'm sure many people are balking at what I have just said, especially if you're not American. So let me go into the nitty-gritty of why this actually is, and why it is different from your quote-unquote progressive nag. America as a nation, as a country, appears to be a Western liberal democracy. Like almost every other Western country within the world. They are Western liberal democracies. But America is unique in that the basis of the entire system is much more ancient than any kind of liberal ideal. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I mean the following. As modern liberal countries see it, they are, as governments, there to, first of all, teach their citizenry how to be moral and, in the long run, to keep them moral. And, oh, by the way, yes, laws and politics are an extension of moral philosophy. That's specifically, logically, and rationally what they are. If you have politics, that is morality. It's just a specific extension of morality. So if you have laws, that's morality. If you have a government, if you have a nation that's based upon any kind of rules, those are extensions of moral thought. If you think you can live apart from any of that, well, you're going to be Polyphemus, living on an island by yourself in a cave. But back to modern Western liberal democracy. They believe that they are the successor of the moral standard. They have taken up that standard from religion, and they are now the ones who get to teach their citizenry morality and keep them morally in line. Now, they still might employ some religious connection in order to do so, but that's the basic mindset of modern Western liberal democracy. But for America, it is quite different. America and Americans believe that the government, as it is instituted by the people, isn't there to teach and maintain morality, but that morality already exists and needs to exist before that government can be created. And as I said, these are ideas which are much older. These are medieval and ancient ideas based upon concepts of natural law. Now, to flesh out just one principle of that natural law, which is important here, and as an aside, I freely admit from the get-go that this is an idea that has taken quite a pummeling, even in American society, for the last minimum 60 years. But it is the idea within natural law that the individual is not the atom of society, the building block of society. It is not the individual. It is the family. Again, this is one of the separate ideas of America because it is against the grain of your normal Western liberal society, which holds up the idea of an atomized, sovereign individual. That's not the basis of America. The basis of America is that the atom is made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons. Those are the members of a family, and that is the atom of society, the family. And why? Well, because the family is seen as the little church. That is to say, it is the church, the small form of the church, wherein the individuals of that family are taught morality. And by the way, not just any morality, because this is a Christian idea. So it is Christian morality that is taught. Quite honestly, as an aside again, what I think is going to be the biggest quote-unquote slur coming out of the left in the next 4 years is to call people in a derogatory manner over and over again Christian nationalists. I think you're going to hear this more and more screamed from the housetops as these 4 years go by. And what conservative people need to do is to just own it, quite honestly, to say, yeah, so America is a nation. America is based on Christian ideals. Americans are, for the most part, Christian. So you want to call us Christian nationalists, that's an actual compliment, not a derogatory term. And here's the thing. It's not just Christianity either. It's a very specific form of Christianity that America was built on, or at the very least was the backdrop of the ideas of Christianity held by the founding fathers, even if they might not have held these beliefs strictly themselves. And what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about Puritanism. Have you ever wondered why America is so extreme? Well, it's so extreme because its foundational idea was Puritanism. And quite honestly, this is why you have the modern, quote-unquote, progressive left in the format that it is right now. It's trying to present an alternative to Christian Puritanism that is based upon a man-centered world rather than a God-centered world. It's not trying to get rid of the entire system. It's just trying to take the basis of the system and move it around a different focal point. That's the only difference between it and what America traditionally is. And quite honestly, you go through history, the same thing happens over and over again in different places, in different ways. I could do an entire separate video on Stoicism, on the cult of Mithra, on Kant, on Nietzsche. Doesn't matter. The whole thing pops up over and over again. But this way is the way it pops up specifically in America. And so, yeah, that's why America is extreme. That's why its history is extreme. That's why America will continue to be extreme, because the entire idea and the entire reality of America is based upon Puritanism. It's not going to change. It may swing back and forth from one to another, and we'll get into the difference of those swings from one to the other in a little bit, but it's going to be extreme. And people today don't want that extreme. But you know what? Too bad, because America is based upon that and is going to continue to have such an idea at its basis. And why? Well, because of what I had just said a couple of minutes ago. Because these ideas of morality precede the idea of the creation of the state of America, precede the idea of the government of America, and then precede America itself as the great experiment for mankind. If you remove that moral basis, you remove the entire foundation principle of why America exists. Now, how people cling to those puritanical principles and a shift in whether or not they can be moved from the exact place they started at is a different discussion. And that's the discussion, quite honestly, that your quote-unquote progressives believe that they can move it. But again, separate discussion entirely. But thinking about that exact thing, that the morality of the American ideal, and quite honestly, not just the ideal, but how it exists on the ground as well, precedes the creation of the nation itself, then it must then not only defend that morality, but be the one who defines that morality. And that is true to the extent that if you have a foreign power defining what the moral line is for Americans, then the American experiment ceases to be. So let's bring this entire thing back down to the street level once again. Talking about video games, where Razorfist and Melanie Mac come into this entire thing. They're applying an American standard to it. Why? Why? Because they're Americans. Not just Americans, but Christian-believing Americans. And they're saying, okay, well, here's the thing. You over in Japan or Korea, you're making something of merit, something that Americans have not been able to do for the last 20 years or so. That's laudable. Yes, sure. But in creating this thing, which is being used by Americans, you're inserting into the entire thing, as is normal within a story, some kind of morality. But that level, that line of morality, is not set by American standards. Therefore, you're going to have to reset your line. And that's their entire argument, because they're American. They're saying, well, I'm looking at these games, and while, yes, they have merit, they don't have a line in the sand of morality that America chooses. And that's a problem. And I would dare say neither of those two individuals even understand that that's where it's coming from. But that is where it's coming from. They're saying, no, this doesn't meet American standards of morality. Because again, the moral line is drawn in the sand by America, by Americans. Now, if you want to create a product that's just for Koreans or just for Japanese, you go right ahead. Put whatever moral standard in you want. But if you're creating a product that is being used by Americans, and it's a story, and a story contains a moral standard within it, because usually you have a bunch of characters, and those characters interact with each other, and therefore they are engaging in social interaction, if not political interaction, which again is a standard of morality, then you're going to have to make that standard of morality American. America is going to have to define it. Why? Because we can't have Americans following a standard of morality that is generated by people in a country that is not America, because it will destroy the very basis of that moral standard, which needs to exist before the government itself and the state itself and the country itself can exist. Or in other words, in letting other countries draw a moral line in the sand within their entertainment and then selling it to Americans who then use it, they are admitting a Trojan horse to undermine the very basis of the existence of America. Now, let's get to the point of how is this any different from what your quote-unquote progressive people with their puritanical ideas were pushing. It doesn't make any difference to some people. They're just looking at both of these things and saying, well, both of them are pushing a moral standard, therefore they're both the same. So we're going to condemn the people who do it on the right just the same as we have been condemning the people who have done it on the left for the last 10 to 15 to 20 years. Well, the difference is this. Most people say you're just being the same moral nags that emerged within the conservative scene within the 80s. But let's look at these two different decades, the 80s and, well, let's just say 2015 to 2025. Now, Both of them had, according to this argument, moral nags, one from the right and one from the left, respectively. But let's look at the products that were produced within the 1980s as compared to the products produced within the decade of 2015 to 2025. Most people laud and appreciate and hold up as a standard the products produced in the 1980s, even though they were under these moral nags. Whereas there's nothing you can point to in the last 10 years that is an example of excellence in almost every field, let alone entertainment. That's the difference. The difference is that right now, America is going to say, okay, if you're going to make, let's say, these games in Korea, you're going to have to follow an American moral standard in doing so. And if you don't do so, we're going to clobber you over the head with economic sanctions. Pure and simple. Whereas the progressives were doing the same thing. They were just saying, if you do not produce these games according to the quote-unquote progressive moral standard, we're going to knock you over the head with economic boycotts. Isn't it the same thing? Well, no, it's not the same thing. Why? Well, because your quote-unquote progressives were a paper tiger. It was a hollow threat because their go-to, their stick of the threat was international law, basically, and international control of law. And that has no real teeth. So they can't force people to do this in an international way. That's why they're pushing for globalism so that they can have a standard, one standard for the entire world so that they can control. But again, that's a paper tiger. That doesn't have any teeth. But the conservative way of saying the exact same thing, do this, create it according to our moral standard, the American moral standard, or we will hit you over the head with sanctions of one kind or another, economic sanctions, of course, which is exactly what Trump is doing. He's saying, create your products which are being sold to Americans upon the standard of making America great again. If you don't, we're going to slap economic sanctions on you. Now, again, what's the difference? Well, the difference is that's enforceable on the right. Why? Because it's not a paper tiger. There's an actual threat behind that. And that actual threat behind it is merit. And that principle of merit says, okay, if you want to make something that Americans are going to consume, you're going to have to do it according to the standards of America. If you don't want to do that, we're going to slap these sanctions on you. If you still don't respond positively to what we say, then we're simply going to take what you make, we're going to use it as our baseline, bring it into America, and have Americans create it, which we can do a better job than you, and we will outsell you, and we will destroy you economically. That's the point. We will make a better product than you and drive you out of business unless you do what we say. And quite literally, this is part of all of the executive orders that Trump has been signing over the last couple of days. We're going to make America the leader in AI technology again, bringing all of the innovation back to America. And sector after sector after sector is part and parcel of so many of these executive orders that he has just signed. That is partly what he is saying with all of these declarations. He's saying, if you want to sell to Americans, you do it according to American standards. And if you don't, we're going to take it away from you and build something better. And let's look just at gaming for a second. If America is going to be, as it is intended by some of these executive orders, the new tip of the spear for artificial intelligence, if all of that does come to pass and America becomes the gold standard of how to create artificial intelligence, do you not think that is going to draw all of the other computer-based creations that are looking for a gold standard in the world? It's going to draw it into America, and part of that's going to be gaming, and it's going to go back to America, and Americans are going to use American standards. Once again, this is the point. Why there is a difference between the right and the left here, because the right is basing it on merit, and that merit has itself merit because it's based upon ideas of reality. The left is basing their ideas on a fantasy. Its only go-to is a stick, which is a paper tiger, which is an illusionary threat, which is they're maintaining a power through deception. But the right is saying, nope, we have merit at the very basis of the entire thing. If you don't do it according to our standards, we will take it from you and do better than you. Pure and simple. And again, as I said at the beginning of this video, you may not like any of that or want to have anything to do with any of that. Well, guess what? Too bad. I'm not telling you you have to bend the knee to this. I'm saying this is the way it is. And it actually has traction because, again, it's based on reality. It's not based on pie in the sky, building a castle on clouds, as the left is. It's built on guys having boots on the ground, pushing something in one direction. It has traction. And I know this has been a long video, and I haven't really talked a whole lot about story and heroes, but that's the entire point. You need to understand all of that and accept that that is the way America works in order to understand why American stories and American heroes are different. As I said, any story is, in one form or another, based upon social interactions of people. Those social interactions are based upon moral standards because social interactions, the political, are a moral standard. Politics is an arm of moral philosophy. So there is an expression, one way or another, of morality within any story. And America sees morality in a way that is quite different than everyone else within modern Western society. And certainly the rest of the world as well. Because they believe that moral standards should exist before you start to create. And not only that, but exist in a very specific American way, which again is a puritanical way. Because again, the existence of America as a nation, as a country, must defend the initial American ideas of morality for it to exist. And not only that, but it also brings into the idea of American exceptionalism. Why does America get to define all of this? Because America, according to Americans, is exceptional. Once again, goes back to that Christian idea that America is based upon. It is one nation under God. And it doesn't matter if you agree with that or not. The majority of Americans still believe they are one nation under God. Now, at this point, there may be the slimmest majority in all of American history, but it's still the majority of Americans. And if you add to that the puritanical ideas that I'm talking about, it's not just we are one nation under God. It is we are the closest, the most perfect expression of a country under the ideas of what God wants a country to be that has ever existed within the history of the human race. That makes us exceptional. Therefore, yeah, we get to define where the moral line is. And again, just for a second, bring this back down to street level. I don't think anybody here would argue with the fact that America produced some stunning and entertaining pieces of entertainment within the decade of the 80s. So much so that you had other countries imitating the American style of entertainment. So let's go over to one of those. Let's look at Japanese animation during the 1980s and how it was in many facets a reflection of the American storytelling. But here's the thing. Why is that anime so different? Why is it so extreme? So extreme, by the way, that I don't know about you, but I can remember back when my Blockbuster was open and they had a section for Japanese anime. Guess where it was? It was next to the pornography section. And when you brought one of those up to the desk in order to rent it, yeah, you were looking at a person behind the desk that was looking at you going, you realize what this is, right? It doesn't matter if it was pornography or not. It doesn't matter if it was crossing the line or not. All of it was looked at in that fashion. Why? Because they didn't understand the American standard of morality and where the line was. Sure, they could mimic how to tell stories in an American way, but they didn't understand where the line was of morality that Americans employed in order to tell their stories. And some people look back at it and don't understand that that's what was going on. They don't understand. They look back at 80s Japanese anime and go, wow, that was extreme. Why was it so extreme? It was so extreme, once again, because they were mimicking an American style of storytelling while not understanding where the moral line was, because they weren't Americans, pure and simple. And the same concept goes doubly for ideas of hero-based stories. America, once again, is a country of extremes. It was built that way. It's not going to stop being that. American stories are built upon extremes. Extremes, however, which have a very specific moral standard which tells them where to stop. And by the way, this is why current stories, hero-based stories, like say Marvel Comics, have no idea what they're doing. Why? Because these quote-unquote progressive creators have no idea where that American moral standard is either. They don't even think that standards for morality exist, even while they are pushing their own moral standards. They still don't believe that. That's why they have heroes which are humming and hawing and going, should I do this? Should I not do this? Am I a hero? This is the whole deconstruction of heroes that began in the 90s with, by the way, English storytellers, and has continued on and metastasized until today. These are not American heroes, because American heroes don't do that. American heroes might say, well, I can't live up to this moral standard. It is just too difficult for me. But they don't question the moral standard. The deconstruction of heroes that you've seen for the past 30 years is to question the moral standard itself. That's not American. Because once again, if you question the moral standard and try to take out its legs, that is taking out the very thing which is supporting the existence of the nation as a whole. Because morality, very specifically American morality, precedes the creation of the nation. So American heroes are indeed extreme. Extreme in the fact that they have a moral standard and they will live up to it. There is no questioning of it. There might be a question of, do I have the strength to live up to it or not? But there's no questioning of that moral standard. That's why they are so resolute. And that's why they resound within the hearts and minds of people all over the world. That's why they are inspirational for people all over the world. They look at these heroes and say, I wish I could live up to that kind of a moral standard. Something within me is envious of a people that can do such a thing. Heroes that can do such a thing. Live up to such a moral standard in an unblinking, unflinching way. And they can do that because of merit. Because when the rubber hits the road, when the boots hit the ground, they have traction. Traction that is generated from 2,000 years of a religious tradition that has reconciled itself with accepting reality as it is, which has produced ideas like natural law, or the extension at the very least of ideas like natural law, because they promote working in concert with reality that brings merit, that, in the end, supports such heroic ideals because on the ground it simply gets results. And you can whine and cry all you want about, well, I don't want it to be this way. I don't believe in this, that, or the other thing which you're talking about. It doesn't matter. If you want merit-based entertainment, you look to America. You look to America, which has a moral standard which they defend come hell or high water. And if you don't like that, then you can continue to drown in the slop of mediocrity that we have right now. So, if I've given you anything new to think about, hit like, hit the shield in the lower right-hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a comment. As with my last video, I'm sure I'm going to get plenty of interesting comments on this video. And don't forget, there are 2 links in the description and the pinned comment for my 3 graphic novels based upon the idea of a traditional virtuous hero. You're looking at some of the beautiful art for those graphic novels in the background. So if any of that looks or sounds appealing to you at all, click on one of those links in the description and go on over and see if one of my graphic novels is for you. All right, I'll leave it there. I'll see you later. Bye.